Oh, you're just a homemaker. The words dripped from the CFO's wife's lips like poison. How quaint. The table of executives, people whose mortgages I could pay off with a rounding error, smirked. They saw a nobody, a decorative +1 in a simple dress. They had no idea they were looking at the mystery investor their husbands had been losing sleep over for 6 months. They didn't know that with a single phone call, I could bankrupt every single one of them. So as they laughed, I smiled right back, because a brutal question was forming in my mind. Which one of their careers should I end first? Life, has a funny way of surprising you. One minute you think you've got it all figured out, comfortably tucked into your little corner of the world. The next, something shifts, and suddenly you're seeing everything with brand new eyes. For me, that shift started, of all places, at a very fancy, very important dinner. My name is Sarah. For years, I've been, David's wife. And a mom. A darn good one, if I do say so myself. David, my amazing husband, he's a brilliant guy. A real go-getter at Catalyst Innovations, a big tech firm. He was climbing that corporate ladder faster than a squirrel up an oak tree, and I was right there with him, cheering him on, managing our little empire at home in our cozy upstate New York neighborhood. Our house, our kids' schedules, the finances, the whole shebang. It was a good life, a really good life. Then came the invitation. Not just any invitation, mind you. This was the invitation, the annual CEO's dinner, the Super Bowl of corporate mingling, held at the Grandview Estate, a place so swanky it practically shimmered from across the Hudson River Valley. David was ecstatic, and I was a mix of excited for him and a little bit nervous. This wasn't our usual Friday night pizza and a movie. This was the big leagues. I spent days trying to find the perfect dress. Something elegant, not too flashy. Something that said, "I'm here, I belong," without screaming for attention. I wanted to be David's proud partner, not just a +1. I wanted to fit in. Silly, right? You'd think a grown woman would be past caring what other people think. But there's something about stepping into a world that feels so utterly foreign, so polished and exclusive, that makes you second-guess everything. The Grandview Estate certainly lived up to its name. Chandeliers sparkled like 1,000 diamonds. The scent of expensive perfume and even more expensive food hung in the air. Everyone looked like they'd stepped right off the pages of a magazine. David, bless his heart, was in his element, shaking hands, laughing, talking shop. I tried to follow, to keep up, to smile at the right times, but I felt like I was wearing an invisible cloak. Or maybe a perfectly visible sign that said, "Out of place." I eventually found myself on the fringes of a conversation with a few of the other wives. They were talking about their latest philanthropic endeavors, their designers, their country clubs. I tried to chime in to find some common ground. That's when Brenda, the CFO's wife, turned to me, her smile tight, almost condescending. "Oh, you're just a homemaker?" she asked, her voice dripping with an almost saccharine sweetness. How quaint. The conversation, which hadn't exactly been with me, certainly shifted away from me then. It was like I'd said something utterly inappropriate, or worse, like I'd said nothing at all, and then they just moved on. Quaint. The word hung in the air, echoing in my mind. Quaint. Like a dusty old antique. Suddenly, the elegant dress felt itchy. My smile felt forced. I felt invisible. Later, as David was pulled into another high-stakes discussion, I found myself drifting. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but you can't help but hear things in a room like that. Hushed tones about a potential acquisition, a struggling subsidiary, and the mystery investor who could either save or sink the company. A shiver went down my spine. The casual disdain I'd just experienced from Brenda and her cronies, that felt like child's play compared to the storm brewing in the actual business world. This, I realized, was just the beginning. And as we drove home, David still buzzing from the evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. Something far beyond my quaint little world. I just didn't know yet how intimately connected I was to it all. You know that feeling, don't you? That sting of being dismissed, of being called a nobody. If you've ever felt that, if you've ever been underestimated, then you have to stick around for what happens next. Because trust me, this is just the beginning. Don't you dare click away. Not now. Not when Sarah is just getting started. Hit that subscribe button, or you'll miss the real turning point. That quaint comment from Brenda gnawed at me. It wasn't just the words, it was the entire atmosphere of that dinner. The subtle glances, the way conversations seemed to ripple around me rather than include me. And it wasn't just that night. I started to notice it more in our everyday social gatherings in Westchester County. The polite but distant smiles from other corporate wives, the assumptions that my biggest concern was, well, whatever homemakers concerned themselves with. It was always a slight, a dismissal, a quiet way of saying, "You don't belong here." I tried to talk to David about it. I really did. "Honey," I'd start, "sometimes I feel like they look right through me, like I'm just furniture." David, bless his sweet, driven heart, would usually just give me a quick hug. "Oh, Sarah," he'd say, "don't pay them any mind. They don't mean anything by it. You know how important you are to me." And I knew he meant it. He loved me, truly, but he was so wrapped up in the corporate grind, in climbing that next rung, that he just couldn't see how those casual dismissals chipped away at me. He was in their world, and he wanted me there too, but he didn't realize how much of himself he had to be to survive it, or how little they seemed to value what was outside of it. But those whispers from the CEO dinner about the struggling subsidiary, the acquisition, the mystery investor, those stuck. I've always been good with numbers, with details. It's a skill I've honed over years of managing our household budget, down to the last penny, researching the best school districts, the most efficient utilities, even the most promising investment opportunities for our family savings. So I started digging. Just little bits at first. A name I heard, a company mentioned. You'd be amazed what you can find if you know where to look, especially when you're not looking for anything in particular, just information. One evening, David came home absolutely swamped with paperwork. "Could you just help me organize this, honey?" he'd asked, dumping a mountain of files on the dining room table. Tucked away in a confidential report about the struggling subsidiary, almost as if someone had wanted it to be overlooked, I found a footnote. A strange name, a series of shell corporations. My heart gave a little jolt. It felt familiar, somehow. Not overtly, but like a half-remembered tune, a puzzle piece I hadn't realized I was missing. I spent the next few nights burning the midnight oil. I traced the shell corporations, looked up the industries, found old news articles. The more I dug, the more a pattern emerged. A very specific pattern of investments, a unique phrasing in the legal documents. It was like following a breadcrumb trail. And every breadcrumb, every tiny clue, led to one undeniable, shocking truth. A truth that would not only rewrite my understanding of David's company, but also my understanding of myself. This mystery investor, the one holding Catalyst Innovations in their hands, it was closer than anyone imagined. Much, much closer. The truth, when it finally hit me, felt like a freight train. Or maybe a gentle, insistent whisper that slowly grew into a roar. The mystery investor. The one with the power to save or sink Catalyst Innovations. It was me. For years, David had been so focused on his career, on climbing the corporate ladder, that he'd entrusted me with something incredibly important, a significant portion of his early bonus money and our joint savings. He'd told me to invest it, to be smart, to make it grow for our future. He probably envisioned safe, steady mutual funds. What he didn't know was just how smart I'd been. My homemaker schedule might have looked empty to some, but it was filled with research, with learning, with quietly honing a knack for spotting undervalued assets. While the other wives were discussing charity galas, I was diving deep into market trends. I'd built a substantial portfolio, diversified and carefully managed, and a portion of that portfolio, I had quietly invested it into a diversified fund that, unbeknownst to David, had recently acquired a controlling interest in the very shell corporations now poised to take over that struggling subsidiary of Catalyst Innovations. The very subsidiary David was so stressed about, the very company Brenda's husband, the CFO, worked for. Can you imagine the shock? The sheer unbelievable revelation? Sarah, the homemaker, is the mystery investor. This isn't just a story, it's a testament to unseen power. If you've ever doubted your own hidden strengths, you need to see how Sarah wields hers. Don't leave her hanging. Show your support by subscribing right now, or you'll regret not being there for the big reveal. The weight of that secret. It was immense. I wasn't just David's wife anymore. I was, in a very real sense, the person holding the fate of Catalyst Innovations in my hands. The people who had looked down on me, who had called me quaint, they were indirectly working for me. This realization hit me particularly hard when we were planning a little weekend getaway to the Hamptons. It was a place I'd always felt a bit like an outsider, surrounded by the ultra-wealthy, feeling like I didn't quite belong. Now I knew I belonged more than they could ever imagine. My perspective shifted entirely. I started seeing the world through a different lens. The corporate machinations David talked about, the subtle power plays, the unspoken hierarchies, it all made sense now. My homemaker role, the very thing they'd used to diminish me, had been my greatest advantage. It allowed me to be underestimated, to fly under the radar, to observe without being observed. It was a kind of quiet power, a secret strength. Then came the news. A crucial board meeting was scheduled. The vote on the acquisition would determine the company's future. I knew I had to act. But how? I didn't want to undermine David, who was genuinely good at his job. But I also couldn't let my quiet contributions, my years of hard work, remain unacknowledged, especially when the livelihoods of so many people depended on it. It wasn't about revenge anymore, not entirely. It was about justice, about proving that true value isn't always stamped on a business card. David came home that night, absolutely drained. He slumped onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. "Sarah," he sighed, "this mystery investor is killing me. The board is on edge. If we don't get this acquisition right, if we can't turn that subsidiary around, a lot of good people are going to lose their jobs. I just don't know what to do." I looked at my brilliant, kind husband, so worried, so stressed. A knowing glint, a spark of resolve, ignited inside me. I squeezed his hand. "Don't worry, honey," I said, my voice calm, but with an underlying strength he hadn't heard before. "We'll figure this out. We always do. And who knows, I might even have an idea." He looked at me, a flicker of hope in his tired eyes, but also a question. A big, unanswered question. He had no idea just how big. And I knew, then and there, that tomorrow, everything was going to change. What happens when you realize everything you thought was true isn't? When you discover a secret that could change everything? Sarah just uncovered something huge, something that directly connects to her. You need to know what it is. If you're still watching, it means you're invested in Sarah's journey, just like she's invested in, well, you'll see. You owe it to yourself to subscribe and see her next move. Or if you won't, tell us why in the comments. Are you afraid of what she'll do next? The air in the Catalyst Innovations boardroom in downtown Manhattan was so thick with tension you could cut it with a knife. The city skyline stretched out behind the floor-to-ceiling windows, a stark contrast to the grim faces around the polished conference table. David, bless him, looked ready for battle, but I could still see the worry etched around his eyes. I sat beside him, calm on the surface, but with a quiet storm brewing inside me. This wasn't just another board meeting. This was the moment everything changed. During a particularly heated debate about the struggling subsidiary, the conversation spilled over into a short break. Brenda, the CFO's wife, the one who'd called me Quaint, made a beeline for David. Her smile was still tight, but with an added edge of smugness. "David," she purred, "I just hope whoever you're relying on for advice truly understands the intricacies of corporate finance. It's not exactly a realm for, well, for those who don't do anything, if you know what I mean." Her eyes flicked pointedly to me, lingering for a beat. A few other executives chuckled, nodding in agreement. It was the same old song and dance, but this time it felt different. This time, I had the lyrics. David, at a critical point, was about to make a desperate plea for more time, for a Hail Mary strategy. But before he could, I subtly caught his eye. Just a glance, a tiny shake of my head. He hesitated, confused. Then I stood up. The scraping of my chair against the floor echoed in the sudden silence of the room. Every eye, every single one, was on me. Brenda's jaw slackened. The chuckling executives froze. David looked utterly bewildered. "Actually," I began, my voice clear and calm, cutting through the stunned silence. "Mr. Harrison, your projection for the subsidiary's Q3 valuation is off by nearly 12%, primarily due to an oversight in the projected market saturation for the new Viridian product line and an underestimation of Q2's raw material cost increases. The acquisition, as proposed, would expose Catalyst Innovations to an unacceptable level of debt." I cited specific figures, market trends, all from the research I'd been doing for months. The executive stammered, his face paling. Then I turned to the entire board. "And as for the mystery investor you've all been so concerned about," I continued, my gaze sweeping across the room, landing for a moment on Brenda. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am Sarah Miller, and I am that investor." The silence this time was deafening. Jaws dropped. Brenda's face turned beet red, a furious shade of crimson that practically vibrated with humiliation. David looked utterly stunned, his mouth slightly agape, a mixture of shock, pride, and a tiny bit of mortification washing over him. The executives, who just moments ago had been dismissive, now stammered apologies, trying to backtrack, their eyes darting nervously around the room. The entire power dynamic in that single instant had shifted, dramatically, irrevocably. "This company," I stated, my voice firm, "like any successful endeavor, relies on the contributions of everyone, not just those with fancy titles, but also those who work tirelessly behind the scenes, whose intelligence and dedication are often overlooked. Underestimation," I added, looking pointedly at Brenda, "can be a very dangerous thing, and it's a mistake this company can no longer afford to make." I then laid out my strategic vision for the struggling subsidiary, a plan so well-researched, so insightful, that even the most skeptical board members couldn't deny its brilliance. "Now," I concluded, a steely glint in my eye, "let's talk about the future, and a few personnel changes." They all knew exactly what I meant. She didn't just walk in there, she took control. She didn't just speak, she commanded. The look on their faces? Priceless. But what happens next? How does she rebuild? And who does she truly become? You've seen her stand up, now see her soar. Don't you want to be part of that journey? Subscribe, or you'll be missing out on the most empowering part of this story. Seriously, what's stopping you from joining the team? The days following that board meeting were a blur. Sarah Miller was no longer David's wife, the homemaker. I was a respected, influential figure at Catalyst Innovations. The personnel changes I'd subtly hinted at were, shall we say, implemented. Those who had consistently undermined David or me found themselves politely but firmly out of a job. Brenda's husband, the CFO, got a serious wake-up call, though Brenda herself rarely showed her face at any corporate events after that. And I took on an active role in turning around that struggling subsidiary, leveraging every bit of financial acumen and market understanding I'd quietly built over the years. I commanded respect, not because of a fancy new title, though I eventually got one, but because of proven ability. Some executives, humbled and clearly embarrassed, came to me with their apologies. I handled them with grace, but also with firmness. I made it clear that respect wasn't just a nicety, it was a fundamental requirement for anyone working with me. I ensured that those who had genuinely supported David and, by extension me, were recognized for their loyalty and hard work. And David? Oh, David was absolutely bursting with pride. His admiration for me grew tenfold. Our relationship deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared success that was stronger than ever. He saw me in a completely new light, appreciating my intelligence and strength beyond my roles as a wife and mother. Through my actions, I had inadvertently, or perhaps inevitably, taught everyone a powerful lesson, a lesson about judging a book by its cover, about the hidden strengths in unexpected places, and about the quiet, persistent power of determination. It wasn't about revenge in the end, not really. It was about earning respect. It was about proving that value isn't just measured in boardrooms or by job titles. It's measured in dedication, in intelligence, in quiet contributions that often go unseen. The subsidiary thrived under my guidance, saving countless jobs and significantly boosting Catalyst Innovations' reputation. I found immense satisfaction in my new, challenging role. I had proven, not just to them but to myself, that my worth extended far beyond the confines of any title. I became a respected leader, not just in business, but as an example of quiet strength and resilience. The invisible woman was invisible no longer. I was a powerful force, confidently walking into a future where my contributions were not just seen, but celebrated. And it all started with one dinner and one very quaint comment. "So what's your story? What hidden strengths do you possess that the world hasn't seen yet? Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do. The world needs your unique brilliance, whether it's in a boardroom, a classroom, or your own backyard. Never underestimate the power of quiet determination." Sarah's story isn't just about revenge, it's about finding your voice and owning your power. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel seen, if it made you believe in your own potential, then there's one thing left to do. Don't just walk away inspired, become part of our community. Hit that subscribe button now, and if you don't, tell me why in the comments. Are you genuinely okay missing out on more stories that might just change your perspective? I double dog dare you not to subscribe.